Hello and welcome to a new episode of Nile TV Newsroom Live. I'm Ram Morsi, and if you're watching this show for the very first time, let me reintroduce you to what this show is all about. This show is composed of a number of different segments. Firstly, we take a closer look at the world of politics. Next comes business and finance. And then we learn more about what's happening in the tech world, in addition to the latest cultural and arts events, and a closer look at sports. We're going to have a lot in store for you, but we're going to take a short break and start off with a political segment. Starting off with President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi wrapping up his state visit to the Armenian capital Yerevan on Sunday and the latest leg of his Asian tour. The visit, which centered on bilateral ties and issues of mutual concern, was the first of its kind by an Egyptian president since Armenia's independence, in which Egypt was the first Arab country to hold diplomatic ties with it. The story.
Speaking at a joint press conference with Armenia's President Fahagan Khatchatorian following their talks in the Armenian capital on Sunday, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi described ties between Cairo and Yerevan as distinguished and said their talks had focused on Egypt's leap in the field of energy and its strategy regarding green hydrogen. The president further said the talks had also centered on issues of mutual concern, including the latest developments in the Middle East region. During the press conference, President el-Sisi stressed the significance of coordination between the two countries to achieve economic cooperation. He noted that efforts to remove obstacles facing investors in Egypt were also discussed. For his part, the Armenian president described the visit as historical and asserted that Cairo plays a leading role in the Middle East region. He expressed appreciation for care directed at Armenians in Egypt. President el-Sisi also held talks with the Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, during which they called for expanding cooperation between the two countries in various domains. El-Sisi called for fostering ties between the two nations in various spheres, especially in light of these strong and extended ties between the two nations, emphasizing Armenia's positive attitude towards Egypt. For his part, the Armenian Premier expressed his happiness with the President's visit to the country for the first time, citing his country's interest in developing ties with Egypt in light of its role in the Middle East and Africa regions. He also praised historic and special ties that have long linked the two friendly countries and the momentum that these relations have witnessed in recent times through the exchange of high-level visits, the latest of which was the Armenian president's participation in the Global Climate Conference, the COP27, that was held in Sharm el-Sheikh. During discussions, the president reviewed the ongoing development plan being carried out by the state, as well as national projects being implemented, providing opportunities for investment. He also witnessed an exchange of views on a number of regional files and crises, probing their implications on the security of the European continent.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, a day before visiting Armenia, had held extensive summits on Saturday and talks with his Azerbaijan counterpart, Ilham Aliyev, at the presidential palace in the capital, Baku. A joint press conference follows the talks. During the talks, the president expressed his sincere appreciation for the warm reception of the Azerbaijani president, hailing the deep ties that connect both countries. Presidential spokesperson Ambassador Bassem Radi had said that both leaders have agreed to boost bilateral cooperation and coordination at all levels, in addition to the political consultation between the two nations. The talks also touched on various developments and regional and as well as international issues of mutual concern. Radi said President el-Sisi and the Azerbaijani counterpart witnessed the signing of a number of joint memorandums of understanding in various fields. President el-Sisi started off his Asian tour by arriving in the Indian capital, New Delhi, last week on Tuesday, upon an invitation from the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to attend the country's Republic Day celebrations as a guest of honor. The day had marked the first day India started work with its constitution in 1950. Presidential spokesman Bassam Radi had said the invitation for the president to attend as a prime guest of honor reflects the great close ties with India and deep appreciation by New Delhi. He said it also reflects India's strong keenness to expand joint cooperation between Cairo and New Delhi, being two of the rising countries. Radi said both sides play important roles on a regional and international stage, adding that the visit to India comes 75 years since Egypt and India established diplomatic ties. During the visit, the president was scheduled to hold talks with Modi and the Indian president, as well as other Indian officials. He said the talks focused on mechanisms of boosting economic and investment opportunities. Joining us over the phone to tell us more about the president's Asian tour is Dr. Salah Abdallah, a political analyst. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening. Welcome.
President El-Sisi had visited Armenia in his last final part of the tour itself. What is the most significant aspect discussed between both sides when it came to mutual benefits and ties between Armenia and Egypt?
Well, of course, our relation with the Armenian people have a long history. You know, in the 19th century, in the start of 19th century, Armenian was suffering the violence of the Osmani Empire by that time, and many Armenian people, they came to Egypt here, looking for peace and for kind life. And we have here in Egypt a great number of Armenian people. Some of them are very famous. Of course, the visit of President Sisi to Armenia nowadays, this is the first visit for an Egyptian president to Armenia. And this reflects the political, presidentially, or how the president is leading the politics in Egypt. Armenia, of course, is in a critical side because the Caucasus area is very important to Egypt. You know, there is 3 countries in the Middle East, they have plans or they have agenda: Iran, Israel, and Turkey. And of course, Egypt is keen about the area and the peace in the area, and that's why we consider the Caucasus area is very important to Egypt.
Yes.
Armenia is in the middle of this area and is very important to Egypt. So, of course, there was many cooperations between Armenia and Egypt, and there was many talks about how the
regional
and businessmen in Egypt having a project in Armenia. Of course, this will reflect itself in the coming days. There will be a joint, what we call a joint project between businessmen, Egyptian businessmen and Armenian businessmen.
Yes.
The Armenians, of course, they were very happy with the President Sisi visit, and they are looking forward for more progress in the economic side, and Egypt can play a role, of course, in the problems between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Of course, President Sisi and the Egyptian diplomats can have a good role in that matter to help settling peace between the 2 countries.
Yes. The day before the president was in Armenia, he had visited Azerbaijan as well and discussed a lot of issues that are mutual in concern when it comes to regional and international issues. But they also signed a number of memorandums of understanding. What do you believe are the most significant points that were discussed, or the most significant, I suppose, contracts signed between both nations?
Of course, fighting against terrorism is one of the important points. Economic relations and the increasing the exporting and the importing between Egypt and Armenia is a second issue and very important also. Thirdly, peace in the area, especially between Armenia and Azerbaijan, is very important for Armenia, and of course Egypt can play a role, as I told in that. So what we're expecting in the near future, there will be increase in the economic cooperation between Armenia and Egypt, and some of the businessmen in Egypt can have projects there, and the same thing, the Armenian businessmen can start to invest in Egypt.
Okay, Dr. Salah Abdullah, political analyst, thank you so much for joining us over the phone. We're going to take a short break and move on with the rest of the show. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken wrapped up a two-day visit to Israel and the occupied West Bank on Tuesday with renewed appeals for the Israeli-Palestinian calm. After meeting Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah, Blinken lamented the killing of innocent Palestinian civilians and urged both sides to take urgent steps to calm the tensions. Blinken said that the United States opposed any action by either side that made a two-state solution more difficult to achieve, including settlement expansion, demolitions and evictions, as well as disturbances of historic sites. For his part, Abbas blamed Israel for a sharp escalation of violence in the West Bank, berated the international community for not doing more to pressure Israel, and expressed Palestinian readiness to work with the international community to restore political dialogue to end the Israeli occupation. In January alone, 35 Palestinians have been killed in clashes with Israeli troops, in the bloodiest month since 2015. And Palestinian property by Israeli settlers have also been seized in an increase. Blinken had appealed for calm during the press conference, and this came also in lieu of the attack on a synagogue in Jerusalem, and bringing the total number of Israelis as well killed since 2022 to 33. And the last week, the Palestinian Authority had suspended its security cooperation agreement with Israel after a raid that was the largest of its kind in many years. The Palestinian Authority said it was ending its security coordination with Israel in the occupied West Bank after a deadly Israeli military raid in the Flashpoint city on Thursday, according to a spokesperson for the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. The security coordination with Israel is widely credited with helping to keep order in the West Bank and prevent attacks against Israel. Earlier, Israeli commandos killed 7 gunmen and 2 civilians in a raid in Jenin, according to Palestinian officials, stirring fear of further flare-ups after the largest single death toll in years of fighting. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel was not looking to escalate the situation, though he ordered security forces to prepare for all scenarios. UN and Arab mediators spoke with Israel and Palestinian factions to try to keep the clash in Jenin among areas of the West Bank that have been so intensified by Israeli operations from sparking a broader confrontation. Israel's military said it sent special forces into Jenin to detain members of a group suspected of carrying out and planning multiple major terrorist attacks, according to them. And this was also where 2 women, a civilian man and a woman, were killed during the raids. Israeli commandos killed 9 Palestinians, including an elderly woman, and wounded 12 others during clashes with gunmen on Thursday in a Flashpoint town in the occupied West Bank, according to witnesses and medics. The Israeli military said it sent special forces to Jenin to detain members of a group suspected of carrying out several major attacks, shooting several of them after they had opened fire. The group confirmed battling the Israeli forces as they carried out the unusually deep raid into Jenin's refugee camp, a militant bastion. Another group, Hamas, said its men also took part in the fighting. The death toll, the highest in Jenin in years, drew a warning from the group and that its truce with Israel will be brief. An exchange of fire across the Gaza Strip border last year could be in danger. As the troops withdrew and the smoke and tear gas cleared, civilians who had kept away streamed into the camp to check on casualties. A two-story building that had been on the focus of the fighting was left with heavy damage. At the entrance of the camp's cramped alleyways, local youth threw rocks at the army vehicles. Gunfire echoed as well as occasional explosions as militants set off improvised bombs. There were no casualties on the Israeli side. Joining us over the phone to tell us more about the latest when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian factions is Dr. Nabil Nigma, Professor of International Relations. Good evening to you, sir. Dr. Nigma, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good evening, sir. During U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's Middle East tour, he met with both President Mahmoud Abbas and Netanyahu, and he called for a de-escalation of tensions and going back to the two-state solution. What do you think of these statements and the meetings that took place? Do you think it will help de-escalate the situation?
Actually, it's not as good as it shows, because the conflict or situation in the occupied territory is that there are two parties. Israel, which has occupied West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem, 4th of June 1967. The other party is the Palestinians, who are victims of such occupation. So, calm will not be fulfilled in that part of the world until Israel vowed to the Security Council resolutions 242, 338, and other resolutions.
What are your thoughts, sir, on the Palestinian Authority's decision to end its cooperation with the Israelis on security matters when it comes to a coordination between both factions? They did this as a result of what happened in the West Bank raids.
Actually, we have to recall that Israel has violated both of the agreements between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. And Mr. Abbas found himself in a quite awkward situation. He is coordinating with Israel. In the meantime, Israel is violating every day and night the human rights of the Palestinians and violating the international law as well. So, to restore security cooperation between PA and Israel, I think we need to look back to the real and basic roots of the situation.
Yes, and January had been especially bloody in the West Bank, with at least 35 Palestinians being killed during this time. Why is there a major escalation in the current situation in the West Bank? Has this got to do with the right-wing government that's taking office in the Israelis, with the Israelis?
The new Israeli government is one of the most extreme right-wing governments in the last 3 or 4 decades. But this is not the only reason, my dear. The reason is Palestinians as a nation, as a people, they have the full right to live in a dignified way. Calm will not be restored in that part of the world until the Palestinian people get their legitimate rights.
Yes. Sir, do you also believe that there's possibility that the Israeli side is escalating these settlements and these raids in the West Bank in part due to the Palestinian Authority's filing of a case in the International Court of Justice?
To be honest with you, Israel is an outlawed country. Israel is not respecting the international legitimacy or the international law. And the world is watching the day and night crimes of that state, which is, I call it, out of law state. So we have to ask Mr. Blinken when he goes back to D.C., Washington, to tell his boss that we have to impose the international law on Israel, as well as we are imposing the international law in other parts of the world. But to use the softy politics with Israel, Israel will not stop its crimes against the Palestinian people.
Okay, Dr. Nabil Negbra, Professor of International Relations, thank you so much for joining us over the phone. We're going to take a short break and move on to the business segment. In their extensive summit talks in Baku, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and his Azerbaijani counterpart Ilham Aliyev tackled a number of cooperation economic files, as well as witnessing the signing of joint memorandums of understanding between the relevant government sectors of the two countries in the fields of culture and water resources. This is in addition to the MOUs between the Egyptian Ministry of Trade and Industry and the Azerbaijani Ministry of Economy. The two leaders have also discussed enhancing cooperation in various fields, including energy, infrastructure, transport, pharmaceutical industry, tourism and culture. Presidential spokesperson Bassam Radi said President el-Sisi and Aliyev affirmed the importance of enhancing bilateral trade and exchange and economic partnership by establishing a joint businessman council. In this regard, Aliyev hailed the path of economic reform in Egypt, which led to the remarkable improvement in the Egyptian economic indicators. Earlier, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi had said that he looks forward to increasing public and private investment from Azerbaijan in Egypt, citing business reforms introduced by the government to facilitate investment procedures. President el-Sisi made the remarks during a meeting with Azerbaijani businessmen and CEOs of major companies, along with the ministers from both countries. For their part, the business community in Azerbaijan said that they are looking forward to boosting the joint investments with Egypt in light of the huge investment opportunities under the leadership of the president. They also reviewed their plans for injecting new investments or expanding their existing projects in Egypt. Over in Europe, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said on Monday he had acted decisively by sacking Conservative Party chair Nadhim Zahawi. However, his personal tax affairs moving to quell criticism that he had acted too slowly. In the latest scandal to involve one of his ministers, and just months after he entered Downing Street promising to lead with integrity, professionalism and accountability, Sunak has protested his innocence about Zahawi's tax affairs. He said he had moved quickly to sack Zahawi, who was briefly finance minister last year under former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, when his independent advisor ruled that the party chair had broken the rules guiding the behavior of ministers. The opposition Labour Party has described Sunak as being too weak to deal with his party, which ousted two prime ministers last year over scandal and economic chaos. Sunak now faces a challenge to appoint a new chair to Conservative Party, a position made ever more important before an election widely expected next year. With the opposition Labour Party away ahead of the opinion polls, Conservative lawmakers are already jockeying for positions to take a role which could be crucial to the party's future. Zahawi's ousting over his non-disclosure of an investigation into his tax affairs and a resulting fine is yet another setback to Sunak's attempts to restart the government. Police deployed tear gas on rowdy demonstrators in a pension reform protest in Paris on Tuesday. Huge crowds marched through cities across France to denounce a reform that raises the retirement age by 2 years to 64, and which is a test of Macron's ability to push through change now that he has lost his working majority in parliament. In Paris, marching behind banners reading "No to Reform" or "We won't give up," many said they would take to the streets as often as needed for the government to back down. after January 19th, when more than 1 million people took to the streets on the first nationwide strike day. Union said initial data from protests across the country showed a bigger turnout. Opinion polls show a substantial majority of the French oppose the reform, but Macron intends to stand his ground. The reform was vital to ensure the viability of the pension system. According to him, unions around France took to the streets on Tuesday on a second nationwide day of protests and strikes against the government's pension reform plan. In the tech world, OpenAI's ChatGPT chatbot is a software application designed to mimic human-like conversation based on user prompts. It can produce prose or poetry on command and is a prime example of an AI technology that last year gained widespread attention in Silicon Valley. San Francisco-based OpenAI made the chatbot available for free for public testing on November 2022. Within a week of ChatGPT being unveiled, over 1 million users had tried to make the tool talk. According to the co-founder of the project, ChatGPT uses so-called generative AI technology that can learn from data how to create virtually any type of content simply from a text prompt. OpenAI states that their ChatGPT model, trained using a machine learning technique called reinforcement learning from human feedback, RLHF, and can simulate dialogue, answer follow-up questions, admit mistakes, challenge incorrect premises, and reject inappropriate requests. The technique itself isn't a new concept, with the first example going back to the 90s. Initial development involved human AI trainers providing the model with conversations in which they played both sides, the user and an AI assistant. A tool like ChatGPT could be used in real-world applications such as digital marketing, online content creation, answering customer service queries, or as some users have found, even to help debug code. The bot can respond to a large range of questions while imitating human speaking style. As with many AI-driven innovations, ChatGPT does not come without misgivings. The company has acknowledged that the tool's tendency to respond with plausible-sounding but incorrect or nonsensical answers is an issue it considers a challenge to fix. Australian authorities on Tuesday said they were still searching for a tiny radioactive capsule missing somewhere in the outback as they deployed more personnel and specialized detection equipment to search for it. Daryl Ray, incident controller for the Fire and Emergency Services Department, said teams from the Australian Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety Agency and the Australian Nuclear Science and Technology organizations were providing assistance to locate the capsule. Ray added the search area encompassed Perth metropolitan area up until a mine site north of Newman where the capsule was picked up from. The search was expected to be concluded by next Friday. Authorities suspect vibrations from the truck caused the screws and the bolts to come loose, and the capsule fell out of the package and then out of a gap in the truck as it made a 1,400-kilometer journey in Western Australia state. In the world of culture and arts, Egypt's renowned archaeologist Zahi Hawass on Thursday announced the discovery of important tombs hosting a 4,300-year-old mummy in Saqqara's necropolis near the pyramids of Giza. Several other items, including sarcophaguses, statues, and pottery, have also been found among the tombs. Here's the story.
The mummy, a man named Hikashapes, was found inside a large rectangular limestone sarcophagus in a room located under a 15-meter deep shaft. The renowned Egyptologist Zahi Hawass said that many stone vessels were seen around the sarcophagus, which was completely sealed when it was discovered by the mission. When opening the first sarcophagus, he said he saw a mummy from the Old Kingdom. The mummy was covered with gold leaf, which is thought to be about 4,300 years old. Adding that although Egyptologists all know the highest level of mummification was dated in the New Kingdom, the making of a level in the Old Kingdom couldn't match with those in the New Kingdom. The mummy is the oldest and most complete unroyal mummy found in Egypt to date. At present, archaeologists are conducting further research on the mummy. Egyptologists have uncovered pharaonic tombs that have been sealed for 4,300 years in Egypt, according to Zahi Hawes, the director of an excavation team working at Saqqara, 20 kilometers south of Cairo. Inside one of the tombs was a mummy found at the bottom of a 15-meter shaft in a recently uncovered group of 5th and 6th dynasty tombs near the step pyramid of Saqqara. Amongst other tombs found at the site was one belonging to Khnumbejidef, an inspector of officials, supervisor of the nobles and priests during the reign of Unas, the last pharaoh of the 5th dynasty. It was decorated with scenes of daily life. Another tomb belonged to Mary, keeper of the secrets and assistant to the great leader of the palace. Numerous statues were found amongst the tombs, including one representing a man with his wife and a child.
Joining us over the phone to tell us more about this discovery is Ahmed Badr, a tourism expert. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening to you, and thank you very much, and good evening to all the audience.
Thank you for joining us. Zahi Hawes had said that the discovery is one of the most important tombs to be found so far. What is the real significance of the finding? I know this is not a royal mummy tomb.
Well, Saqqara is really full of surprises. Since the ages of the Old Kingdom, it has been a site for burying the royal and the high-ranked, people of the state at that time. So we find tombs for princes, royalties, high commanders, things like that. So Saqqara is really full of surprises. Saqqara, actually, if we really look at it as a real tourism and marketing for it, easily tourists can spend the whole day there, seeing not just the pyramid, but also the other tombs, the old tombs that discovered years ago, the new tombs. Actually, in Saqqara, we have a new discovery almost every month, every 2 months. So it's really, and still more to go. Definitely, I'm sure that we will find more and more tombs in the Saqqara area, and who knows, maybe one day we'll find something as important as the tomb of King Tut. Who knows? It was a great burial site since the old ages, since the old the first families of Egypt.
Yes, the tomb itself that was discovered contained regular people, I suppose, who were mummified. They were not royals. Why would this be interesting to Egyptologists?
Finding a tomb with ordinary people, not royals, not kings, not princes, it gives us more information about Egypt, about ancient Egypt, about the lives and how they lived and their daily life, and also that it proves that mummification was not something only for royalty, but also it was for ordinary people. Maybe the methods are different, maybe the mummification for royalties was more complicated and definitely more expensive than the others, but still the idea is there. So they did not have big differences between the royalties and normal
citizen,
people,
yes.
which gives us, an idea about the life of ancient Egypt and how it was, and that there was no differences between all of them. So it does mean you're not the royalty, that you're not having mummification.
Yes.
No, you will have, but maybe in a different way. That's, I'm sure that these will tell after they go for more researches about the discoveries and the discovery of the mummies found.
Yes, these discoveries, sir, will they be moved to the Grand Egyptian Museum, or are they going to be studied first and then set into a museum?
I'm not sure. That's a decision with the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. Actually, we have, in the warehouses all over
Yes,
Egypt, that
they're full.
belongs to the museums and
Yes.
especially Egyptian Museum. We have pieces that we can do with them like 10 other museums.
Yes.
So I'm sure some of them will find their way to the Grand Egyptian Museum or the Old Egyptian Museum or the other museums around Egypt, because as I see, they are masterpieces, especially for the statue with the man and his wife. You see even this statue, if you see the measurements of the man and his wife, they're almost the same. So that means, again, that they believed in equality between men and women. There were no differences between them. So these things we can use
Yes.
for, marketing purposes, giving the world an idea about ancient Egypt, making what I call Egypt mania, These things, these small things, small touches will make even more people want to come and see the wonders of our great civilization.
Yes. Sir, my last question here is, when do you expect the Grand Egyptian Museum to actually be open to the public? I know there have been a few events that have been taking place, I suppose, as a soft opening sort of thing, but it's not to the general public.
Well, so far, no fixed date yet. Still with the state, because I know they want to do a grand opening, which is something really we all want, because that will have a huge marketing for tourism to Egypt. So would say it will be around the first half of 2023, I hope.
Yes.
Maybe May, maybe June. Still not confirmed yet. This is just my speculations, but hopefully it will be. We will start the new winter season and end of 23 with the Grand Egyptian Museum open, because definitely this would be a huge add to tourism map into Egypt.
Definitely. Ahmed Badri, tourism expert, thank you so much for joining us over the phone and telling us about the significance of this discovery. We're going to take a short break and continue on with the rest of the episode. And still in the world of the arts, dimension hopping adventure, Everything Everywhere All at Once topped the list of films nominated last week for the year's Academy Awards, securing 11 nominations that include a spot in the prestigious Best Picture race. Others vying for Best Picture include Steven Spielberg's coming-of-age film, The Fabelmans, the splashy Elvis biopic, and Avatar, The Way of Water by James Cameron. Blockbuster sequel that currently ranks as the 6th highest grossing movie of all time. The contenders for the Best Actor are Austin Butler for Elvis, Colin Farrell for The Banshees of Inisherin, Brendan Fraser for The Whale, Paul Mescal for After Sun, and Bill Nye for Living. Competing for Best Actress will be Cate Blanchett for Tar and Armez for Blonde, Andrea Risenborough for To Leslie, Michelle Williams for The Fablesman, and Michelle Yeoh for Everything Everywhere All at Once. Winners of the industry's highest honors will be unveiled at March 12th ceremony hosted by comedian Jimmy Kimmel and will be aired live. The Oscars and other entertainment awards shows have been struggling for a while to attract viewers. Last year's Academy Awards show was attracting a number of viewers when Will Smith slapped the host Chris Rock, and this attracted 15.4 million TV viewers on the record for the current years. And the final segment with sports. If the deal is to go through, it would break the record for the biggest British transfer signing ever. The 21-year-old midfielder who won the World Cup with Argentina in Qatar joined Benfica in July. The speculations had swirled about a possible transfer to the Londoners in the run-up to end the transfer window, which closes on Tuesday. Bayern Munich have signed full-back João Cancelo on an initial loan deal from Manchester City for the rest of the season with an option to buy. The Portugal international at the Bundesliga club said on Tuesday. Cancelo made 16 league starts for City this season but has not played for the club since their derby loss to Manchester United earlier this month, missing the last 3 games. Cancelo has been instrumental for City since his arrival in 2019, winning 2 league titles, while he was also named in the Premier League Team of the Year in the past 2 seasons. The versatile 28-year-old has predominantly played as a left-back but can also operate on a right flank. Bayern, top of the Bundesliga, but have failed to win since the restart after the World Cup. They have had 3 straight draws and their lead over Union Berlin has been cut to a point. Well, this brings us to the end of the sports segment and this edition of Nile TV Newsroom Live, but stay tuned for more here on Nile TV.